Hi everyone, it's 4:30, so we'll get started. Welcome to this pre-COP6 online event for the Minamata Convention. This is with the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform and is about bridging generations to make Mercury history, new tools and partnerships for a child and youth responsive Minamata Convention. I'm just going to run through some housekeeping notes and then I will hand over to the presenters. So if there is space for questions, please raise your hand and we can ask you to unmute. When you finish speaking, please lower your hand and mute yourself again. If you don't want to speak, you can ask your questions in the chat box. And if you have any questions regarding technical support, please send me or any of the other co-hosts a direct message and we can assist you with some technical difficulties. At the end of this webinar, please fill out the survey so that our next online event can be even better. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Joshua to start the presentation.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from. Hi, I am Joshua Gabriel. I am a thematic focal point with the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, and I'm really excited to welcome you to today's pre-COP event. We're bridging generations to make Mercury history, and we're going to be talking about some of the new tools and partnerships for a child and youth responsive Minamata Convention. I know some of you who are here already know about Minamata, and some of you who do not know about Minamata, this is a great opportunity to learn about the work that is done at Minamata and the communities and youth organizations that are leading that work. So welcome again, everyone. Take your time to settle in. We've got an hour-long filled with amazing speakers who are going to take you through introducing you to the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, which I am a part of, introducing you to the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. You're going to get some updates from the GEF, and you also will be witnessing the launch of the Mercury Task Force and youth programming for the COP6, the next Minamata COP that's happening next month. You also will be getting some youth testimonies with mercury pollution, and of course, you'll be getting a little bit of a teaser into the next part of this pre-COP planning sessions. I, as Joshua Loashe, am somebody who got into the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform because I got exposed to chemicals and waste, particularly aerosols and highly hazardous pesticides in my home in Lagos, Nigeria. And so I became an activist whose entire goal was to use storytelling and my story to inspire young people around the world on what it is that we can do as young people to help make our environment cleaner and our air safer to breathe. And I think that that is something that is so important, having young people have a voice, not just in policy making, but also just being a conduit for change to your fellow peers. And through today's session, you will see some of those young people who are making impactful work in their communities through so many different, ways and means. Without further ado, I will introduce or bring on board the stage the global focal point for the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, Shannon Eileen Lisa. She'll be introducing you all to the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, which is the youth platform within the framework of the United Nations Global Group for Children and Youth. Shannon, if you're with us, feel free to turn on your camera and yeah.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And good day, everyone. Thank you again for joining our session today. One of the first formal events connected to the Minamata Convention focused on children and youth, and why mercury pollution is a high concern for children's health, and how different youth-led and youth-serving organizations are working together to bring long-term engagement of young people to the Minamata process. And as Joshua introduced, my name is Shannon Lisa, and I serve as the global focal point of the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, which is the youth constituency to pollution processes at the UN, which I'll share more about in a moment. And thank you again to our partners and to the Minamata Secretariat for making this session possible today. I'll start with covering why chemicals and waste decision-making processes are so important for youth in the first place. We've seen the role of youth-led movements in reshaping policy agendas and pushing environmental issues to the forefront, as with climate change, with many examples of high-profile youth action, Young Go, Fridays for Future, just to name a few. And we think that we need to bring the same youth energy and creativity to the chemicals and waste space, especially because children and youth are the most harmed by exposure to toxic chemicals. We know that mercury's effects on the developing brain, which is widely known to cause changes in personality, ability to reason and remember, or even to move and balance. And the developmental windows of children and adolescents are more sensitive to exposure and disruption by mercury and other toxic chemicals. We also know that mercury can cross the placenta and pass from an exposed woman to her fetus. Generations of children are being born pre-polluted from mercury and a cocktail of other hazardous chemicals before they even interact in the world themselves. And that's why we reflect toxic chemicals and waste as not just a transboundary or traveling across borders issue, but a transgenerational or intergenerational issue. And thankfully, these unique impacts to children and youth are increasingly being recognized in global treaties and policy frameworks on chemicals. On the left is some of the children and youth language that the youth constituency successfully negotiated into the global framework on chemicals in 2023 during ICCM 5, which includes the importance of collecting and making available data on the health impacts of chemicals disaggregated by age. And on the right is the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, which highlights the importance of engaging groups involved in the health of children because of the high concern that POPs pose to children's health. And of course, we see these references to children and future generations in the Minamata Convention text and amendments itself, in both the background and preambular paragraphs, in Annex C on artisanal and small-scale gold mining, and also in the 2022 amendments to Annexes A and B, specifically what is referred to as the Children's Amendment on Dental Amalgam, which excludes mercury dental amalgam use in patients under 15 or pregnant and breastfeeding women. But our question that we've been asking is, has this recognition of more severe impact to children and youth translated to more engagement by youth? And this, for a time had not been the case, as we see in this graph on the screen. This is from 2020, before there was a chemicals and waste youth platform that existed. The SICAM, Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management, Secretariat had tracked engagement of different stakeholder groups. And you could see at the very tippy top, youth were just a tiny 0 to 1% or so of all stakeholders, despite us making up over 50% of the global population. Now, SICAM is a multi-stakeholder driven process, so we can imagine that the numbers of youth participating were even lower for party-driven processes of the MEAs. In other words, youth have been the most harmed by chemicals and waste, but we have also been the least heard in decision-making processes to address them. And this is against a backdrop of more and more of the MEAs already adopting and formalizing youth engagement into their work. Some of the examples on your screen include CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, had a resolution 17.5 in 2016 on youth engagement. The Convention on Biological Diversity, which is pictured right under it in decision XI/8, had a dedicated section on the engagement of children and youth in 2012. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands in 2022 had a resolution XIV 12 focused on strengthening Ramsar connections through youth. We see the UNCCD in 2024 published a youth engagement strategy and action plan, which they collaborated with its youth constituency, the UNCCD Youth Caucus, to produce. And during UNFCCC COP25, an intergovernmental declaration on children, youth, and climate action was launched. And then there was also the recently adopted Pact for the Future, which is important to note, which includes a dedicated chapter on youth and future generations, and calls for meaningful youth participation to be strengthened at the international level in Action 37. And so that's where the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform has come in to close the gap between youth engagement and chemicals processes at the UN. We launched in February 2021 with SciCam, BRS, and Minamata Secretariat there to support the launch. Our membership is universal in nature, meaning any interested young person or youth organization can join through a simple online form. And we serve as a convening place for our member organizations that are accredited to our core engagement avenues, BRS, Minamata, and GFC, to coordinate positions and activities together. And here's a glimpse of our constituency by the numbers. You know, all decisions are taken by the membership of our constituency, which includes policy positions and identifying young people to receive travel grants to participate in person in different negotiation processes, which we are also structuring for this year at COP6. We have over 3,000 members currently. Over 2,500 of those are individual children and youth members, 400 youth member organizations, over 150 countries that youth represent in our membership. And so far, we've funded about 115 different young people to receive travel grants to engage in UN negotiations on chemicals, waste, and pollution. And this is our constituency against the backdrop of many of our sister constituencies in the environment space, where we frequently collaborate with our sister constituencies that are mandated to and closely engaging in other environmental processes in the UN system. And this is just a little glimpse at, you know, some of what we've done in other processes. You know, ICCM5 you see on your right, which is from 2023. We hosted the first ever youth forum on chemicals and waste during ICCM5, which was an 8-hour-long all-youth event with participation by hundreds of youth online and in person, and several thematic panel presentations and intergenerational dialogues between youth, the UN, scientists, policymakers, and member states. And we hosted the second version of that youth forum on chemicals and waste during BRS this year, April 2025, which you could see pictured on your left. And I'll begin to wrap up. You know, Himavati, who will be speaking a little bit later in the session, is going to talk about all of the youth activities that we are lining up for COP6. But one of the major priority points that the youth constituency really would like to see come out of COP6 is a recognition of youth as critical stakeholders and partners in the work of the Minamata Convention. And we would also love to see text, you know, requesting for the development in consultation with youth, a proposal for a children and youth engagement and action plan, like we see across many of the other MEAs, to mainstream youth engagement in the convention, and really take these, you know, big steps to institutionalizing and mobilizing more youth to take action in the chemicals and waste space, including on mercury pollution. So I will wrap up here, and I will take it back over to Joshua to continue the session. And thank you so much for your attention. Possibly, Joshua, are you having some audio issues? I believe next on our list is Minamata Secretariat, Mr. Richard Gutierrez, that we would like to invite to take the floor. So Richard, maybe I'll send it over to you while Joshua sorts out some audio issues.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Shannon, and good day or good evening to all of you. And we're really appreciative of the invitation extended to us by the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform. I'm sorry, I was having some audio issues earlier. Shannon, if you can give me a thumbs up if my audio is clear. Great, thanks. So yes, so as I said, thank you so much to the Chemicals Waste and Youth Platform for giving us this space and inviting us to speak, to provide some short remarks as you go through the event that's been prepared for you this afternoon. To start off, my name is Richard Gutierrez. I'm the Program Management Officer for National Reporting, and I'm also the Secretariat focal point for youth, Indigenous peoples, and observers. So my role here has somewhat been made easier because if you were listening intently to what Shannon was saying earlier, when you look at the convention text, invariably you will find mention of children. And as Shannon rightly pointed out, in the preamble, in Annex C, on elements, the required elements for a national action plan on artisanal and small-scale gold mining, and also in annexes, the amendment to annexes A and B, children are mentioned. But it's also sort of interesting because when you look at the convention, we're a pretty young convention in terms of multilateral environmental agreement lifespan. The Minamata Convention was just was adopted and entered into force in August of 2017. And currently we have 153 parties, so relatively young, an 80-year-old convention. And one of the nice things about being young is that we've learned, or at least we hope, that the negotiator took in and understood the challenges faced by the other older MEAs and tried to incorporate ways to leapfrog those challenges. And you can see that in the way the convention approaches this one singular element. You look at the life cycle of mercury and where the convention tries to have or places control measures from the primary mercury mining all the way to final disposal and recycling, etc. So there's this cool control measure on mercury's life cycle. So where am I headed with this? Well, one of the discerning things that you can see when you look at the language and in the areas where Shannon pointed out earlier is that children and youth are seen as victims from the vantage point of the negotiators way back when in 2017 and earlier. And I think when you juxtapose that picture in what the convention tries to do and where it tries to control, invariably you will see children and youth present directly or indirectly in all of these life cycle stages of mercury. From primary mercury mining, their parents could be miners doing the primary mining or processing these types of ore where children can be exposed. You also have children possibly being exposed in schools, in school clinics where they're maybe using old thermometers that have mercury, from outdated laboratory equipment, barometers that may have mercury as well. And all the way to disposal of mercury, where informal waste pickers, children waste pickers helping their parents out, are exposed to mercury through improperly disposed of hazardous e-waste that has mercury and other hazardous substances. And not to mention the big elephant in the room, in artisanal small-scale gold mining, the largest emitter of mercury globally. You have youths and children exposed either as miners to gold miners participating in the mining with their families, or indirectly watching their parents burn amalgam. So there is this vision or view or perspective where youth are victims. And I think it's time, and I think it's quite an opportune time to change that narrative. And we are fortunate, and you're fortunate to have groups such as the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform that can help change this narrative from victims to being catalysts for change. And I think this is a great opportunity to emphasize this as you develop a voice. And I hope it's not just a voice, but it's actually concrete action on the ground at the community level, at the national level, to make change happen. And I think with that 1-2 punch from action at the ground through voice, opportunity to engage, and not just, excuse me, an opportunity to strengthen meaningful and effective engagement at the convention level is equally important. At this upcoming COP6, you will note that we will be launching the Women's Caucus. You will also note that we are putting forward an engagement decision for Indigenous peoples. And one thing that's sort of missing is youth. And as Shannon has correctly pointed out, if the goal is to bring and engage and empower youth, children and youth, there has to be a plan. There has to be a strong and meaningful plan that involves voices of children and youth, and also seeing them as partners and catalysts for change in the implementation of the convention. So I won't take any further, I won't prolong my remarks, but I just really wanted to emphasize that through these efforts and through these types of events, we hope that children and youth are educated and empowered. And we are hopeful that this type of effort is focused and complementary and supportive towards the implementation of the convention that can lay the groundwork for meaningful and effective engagement of children and youth in the convention. So with that, I end my remarks, and I wish you a good event, and I pass the mic back on to Shannon or to Joshua. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. Can you hear me now, Shannon?
Yes, we can. Perfectly.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just off to a great start. Hearing about the work of the Minamata Secretariat, and of course the work that CWYP is doing to help make that accessible to youth. I was very fortunate to be one of the people at the ICCM5. Shannon shared an image a little earlier on, and it was great to be able to give interventions that helped shape the global frameworks on chemicals. And now I'm gonna bring on Alexis. Alexis is the global, she is going to be introducing the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, who are close partners in including not just youth really, but Indigenous youth, who are some of the people whose lands are most affected and afflicted by the negative impacts of mercury pollution. So without further ado, Alexis McClellan, hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Yes,
hear
we can.
you.
Great. I have slides as well. Not sure if there's a way that they can be put up.
Yes, Maya, maybe you could help us with the slides. There we go. Perfect. Beat me to it.
니헤더 하이타이 구스요 주가나비라 완네 마크레르 후구시크와 짠 야이빈 왔다 유야파 후제 츠카산 시타하크카라자 비탄 왔다 문즈야 에군 야이빈 유타사르그뜨니게 사비라. Hi everybody, my name is Alexis McClellan Ufugushike. I'm an Uchinanshu Indigenous woman of the Ryukyu Islands, which is an archipelago between Japan and Taiwan. Currently, we are part of the nation state of Japan, and I'm serving as sort of this bridge person between the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, for which I've been a member since 2019, and the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, which I've been lucky enough to be involved in the programming also since ICCM5, which is where I met Joshua and Shannon and so many of the lovely people who are working on this today. The Global Indigenous Youth Caucus is an opt-in caucus within the UN system specifically for Indigenous youth. We primarily meet during the permanent forum, but we also are constantly talking and organizing throughout the year. This particular photo was from our preparatory meeting before the permanent forum on Indigenous issues earlier this year in April. We had about 100 Indigenous youth who were participating in the forum this year. And this is just a small snapshot of that. Can I get the next slide, please? So the GIYC was created by and for Indigenous youth delegates to UN meetings, specifically it was started as a way to have a meeting place between young delegates at the permanent forum, but this has also been expanded to some in-person meetings at the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples. And as I said before, there's constant organizing throughout the year. We have a group chat that is so large that we actually have to split it between 2 platforms because it's too big for Messenger. Indigenous peoples makes up less than 6% of the globe's population, but very rarely do we ever make up 6% of government delegations, of permanent missions to the United Nations for our respective countries. Indigenous youth make up even less of those government type delegations. My country of Japan, Indigenous peoples, so the Ainu people and the Mayon people of the Ryukyu Islanders, we're less than 3% of the population, and we don't come anywhere close to 3% of the people who actually work for the nation state. So this is another way in which young people can begin to advocate for our own interests as Indigenous people. We work for our own responsibilities to our ancestors, our lands, and our communities. Next slide, please. Awesome, thank you. So because we're coming up on Minamata COP6, Minamata was the first UN resolution UN protocol adopted after the adoption of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2007. And this COP is coming after a couple very big changes and steps in terms of Indigenous rights in the UN system in just the last couple years. Last year, the General Assembly passed a resolution on enhanced participation of Indigenous peoples. So what this means is that they are currently looking at a way in which Indigenous peoples will be able to represent our peoples, our nations, at the United Nations directly without having to be labeled as NGOs or Indigenous peoples organizations. As has been said before, these are not my words. We're not organizations, we are nations. And so this is giving us an avenue to try to enhance our participation in these meetings on our own terms. The Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women issued General Recommendation 39 in 2022. This is specifically on the rights of Indigenous women and girls, and it names the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the go-to document, the most authoritative document in Indigenous rights. And I encourage you all to read the declaration if you haven't already. And then this is actually a very new development. The Special Rapporteur, Albert Barume, who was just appointed last December, he issued his first report on Indigenous peoples in August of this year. And this was really important because he really emphasizes that Indigenous peoples are not to be conflated with local communities. And he lists guidelines for how local communities should be described if they have to be in the same conversation as Indigenous peoples. So again, I really recommend checking out his report as well. Next slide, please. So the participation of Indigenous youth in Minamata is fundamental to seeking effective solutions, mitigating future harms, and respecting the sovereignty and dignity of Indigenous peoples globally. I really want to emphasize this last part. Indigenous youth carry the passport of member states, but we are sent by our peoples, by our tribes, by our native nations to advocate for our interests when the state will not. At the heart of this is free, prior, and informed consent, as well as our right to self-determination, and in the case of many native nations, particularly in North America, sovereignty as well. Can I get the next slide, please? Great. And so while Indigenous youth are being adversely affected by mercury issues, such as skin lightening products, artisanal gold mining, like was talked about before, and unsafe dental amalgam in children, we're also often subject to mercury pollution and poisoning that is inflicted upon us by member states. Being able to have a platform like GIYC, like the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform, in which we can bring our identities, our priorities, our responsibilities from our peoples directly to the UN, it's really hard to overstate just how important that is, not only to representation, but to sovereignty building, to really setting the stage for good practices with Indigenous peoples in the future. A lot of us who are in the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, we are being sent by our peoples to engage in the UN system earlier and earlier. Last year, the thematic programming of the Permanent Forum was on youth and children. And so we are learning the UN system sometimes as early as the age of like 6 is when I've heard people say that that was their first permanent forum they went to. And so we are being raised in this generation of Indigenous youth with the knowledge that we have these rights that are specifically outlined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And we are bringing that internalized sense of sovereignty, self, as nations, but also responsibilities not only to ourselves, our communities, we also have responsibilities to our ancestors and our non-human kin in these negotiations as well. And so, yeah, like I said, it's really hard to overstate just how impactful being able to represent ourselves at meetings such as this are. And it is all rooted in working towards a international governance system that respects our right to self-determination. And we're here to make that happen. All right, I won't take too much more time, but ipe nihe debitan.
Thank you very much, Alexis. Still waiting for, I think, Joshua to connect again. There you are, Joshua. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Back
Carrie,
over to you.
I was trying to set up my camera, sorry. But no, thank you so much, Alexis. I think it's been a joy sort of getting to know your work over the last couple of years. And I think that it's something that a lot of people should get more invested in because like you said, there's such a power to having Indigenous peoples represent themselves and not have their nation states speak for them, and oftentimes we see that each nation state has its own priorities, and oftentimes that may not be Indigenous youths. Without further ado, I'm gonna call on Tania Martinez Cruz. She is from the Global Environmental Facility. Tania will be giving us updates from the GF9 replenishment, which is on chemicals and waste pillar and youth engagement. And also just the GF support for Indigenous youth participation at the forthcoming COP. So, Tania?
First of all, good morning to everyone. Can you see my screen and my PowerPoint presentation? Yes, okay, sounds good. So I think this is the first time that we are trying to work explicitly at 3 intersections, which I love pretty much, which is so let me just explain that every 4 years, the GEF has something that it's called the replenishment process, which in my words, it's basically the amount of money that the countries will provide for the different projects that we support, but also defining the priorities. And these priorities go from different issues that are environmental, but also how we're gonna engage in a more effective way with people. The GEF9 has the umbrella of the whole of society approach, which is working along Indigenous peoples, youth, women. And this is how we came to be part of this platform. Ushue was supposed to do this presentation, but she's in the middle of a trip. I just landed yesterday and she's still on her way to Washington, D.C. But I work supporting on a focal point of Indigenous peoples, and therefore why I'm here talking to you today. So I think something that many people do not know, because generally when I ask people, do you know what is that the Global Environmental Facility do? They think that we only work on biodiversity. And while yes, it's true that we work on biodiversity, we also work on many other issues, recognizing that the environmental crisis that we are facing today is interconnected. So we respond we are the financial mechanism of our international environmental conventions. One of them is precisely the Minamata Convention, and therefore why we are here. And so the GEF is the largest environmental multi-donor trust fund. It emerged in 1992. I'm not going to go in a deep description of what do we do, but I will be happy to lead you in the direction of learning more about us if that's in your interest. And we also work with 18 different implementing agencies, and we are partners with 184 countries. So you can see that we are quite big in that sense. Let me see. So like I mentioned before, so we work with multiple conventions. We are a family of funds. I'm not going to go in detail into that. Let me just move forward. Okay, so I think I disorganized my presentation, but I will get back to the previous one. So people might ask, how is that we operate? So one thing is the conventions that we have to respond. We work with countries, but at the same time, when it comes to operations, Ushue and myself are sitting at the Secretariat. We have an independent office of evaluation that every year it's assessing how the projects that we have supported are performing, and we like to collect some lessons on how we could do better. We also have a scientific technical advisory group that also chooses thematic issues that will address the performance of the projects that we are supporting, trying to collect lessons. And I mentioned before that we have every 4 years something that we call the replenishment process. We are about to conclude the GEF8, which will finalize in June 2026. Starting July 2029, we will have a GEF9 with specific priorities that are aligned to the conventions I had mentioned, but also for projects or countries that receive funding from the GEF. This project should also obey to follow some of the priorities of each country. We don't know yet how much money will be given to the GEF till now. We are still in that process of negotiation. That's what I think we always say, that we need to collaborate together because we together in a whole of society approach can convince governments to provide more, but also how we should be disbursing these resources to effectively work on the different topics that are affecting our communities, our countries. I'm also coming from an Indigenous community, so I know how little support also goes to Indigenous peoples, and therefore why I'm also advocating to have a more inclusive approach. So the delivery model that we have, we define some focal areas, integrated programs. This might change. This is the architecture. Like I said, everything in a way, it's a negotiated process. Countries define every 4 years what are the focal areas that we will develop based on the international priorities, UN conventions, but also what are the programs that we will use to achieve the global environmental benefits that we are seeking to. Specifically, we have one that is chemicals and waste, and that's where the Minamata Convention falls in a way. Yet, that doesn't mean that only through that program you will address Mercury issues, because we recognize how connected different issues are. Okay, so let me move. I'm not gonna elaborate on that because my sister that passed previously already had mentioned some of the things on the different mechanisms of Indigenous peoples and the recommendations that happen there. We just try to come at the intersection of youth and women too, right? Which are generally excluded more from these processes. So I think in a global way, artisanal small-scale gold mining is one of the issues in many indigenous people's territories. And what the GEF is trying to do is not only support how these activities can be done in a safer ways or we can eliminate them, but also supporting policy processes that can help in promoting mercury-free technologies. We're trying to also improve with countries along countries' regulatory frameworks, raise awareness, strengthen institutional capacity. And that also includes why we came together with the youth, with the, Sharon, I always have an issue to name your network, so you have to excuse me for that. But we came together with a network of youth, the Minamata Secretariat, to see how we could support some delegates to go at the Minamata Convention, in the words of Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the CEO of the GES. We want that people is there to negotiate and to have a voice on the priorities that are needed, so the problems that are affecting their livelihoods can be addressed directly, not intermediaries, not someone else speaking on their behalf. So probably one of the most known programs from the work that we do at the GEF is Planet Gold, and it's aiming to make artisanal and small-scale gold mining safer, cleaner, by reducing or eliminating mercury. Mercury-free technologies, formalizing mining, facilitating access to finance, connecting miners to responsible markets, but also focusing on other issues. It's not only about this artisanal small-scale mining, but also other issues that Shannon also did a good job in summarizing some of them. So we could, like I said, it's about awareness raising, access to finance, formalization, technical solutions. I invite you to go to your browser and Google Planet Gold if you want to learn more about this specific project. But let me take you to one practical example that I love so much, is so close to my heart, because my sister previously had mentioned something about self-determined priorities. We want to focus on projects that are responding to the needs that people have in their communities. During GEF 7, we had the fortune to have approved this project or this initiative that is called Inclusive Conservation Initiative, that funded 10 different projects around the world, and one of them specifically went to Peru, in the Amazon, with the FENAMAT organization, so you might be familiar with that. And it's for monitoring mercury levels in the community. In the words of one of the leaders, he was telling me, if there's no data, for many people, it doesn't count. So part of what they are trying to do with the project is create data, generate data, so they can take that information at policy spaces, and then they can support policy processes that can help reducing or having a policy framework that helps them to reduce the mining concessions that are affecting their livelihoods. And that's also about PIASI. I think I was just watching with all the issues that are happening in the Amazon. I was watching a video that said, like, PIASI is the indigenous people's involuntarily isolation or initial contact. Many times people think that they are like a myth, but with the work that FENAMAT is doing in support or with support of the GEF 7 Inclusive Conservation Initiative, is also protecting them. So there's a lot of illegal mining. One of the indigenous leaders recently was telling me it's not only about the small scaling mining that many indigenous peoples do, but it's also about many concessions in the areas that are affecting us. Because water connects everything, and I don't have to explain this to you, once a part of the ecosystem or the landscape is polluted, that can also be taken to other regions through the water, through the rain, through the soil, etc. It comes to be part of the fish that many of these communities consume, and therefore becomes like a public health issue. So, because they said the government in that region didn't have enough data, what they started to do was to collect and train people to collect samples to train people in raising awareness of the issues that Mercury is having for the population. And that's what they are doing at this stage, collecting data so they can make recommendations. And some of the delegates that will be supporting collectively to go to the COP6 will come from that region. So I hope you get a chance to meet them. In moving forward to the GEF9 and whole of society approach, so we think the GA will continue as a financial mechanism for the Minamata Convention, but also coming within the whole of society approach means that we are seeking to allocate 10% of the funding to civil society organizations, which includes grassroots organizations, indigenous peoples, youth, continue the upholding of the environmental social safeguards for any project that we support. There are some policy requirements that demands that the implementing agencies and executing agencies, for example, in the case of indigenous peoples, we have a standard on indigenous peoples. It's not only about EPIC, but other considerations within it. The stakeholder engagement that should have a consideration on the different people participating in the region, which includes youth, could be at the intersection of indigenous youth if it's related to infrastructure, people with disabilities. We also have a gender policy. So those are some of the mechanisms that we will continue upholding through the GEF9. We particularly, because we have an Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group at the GEF, we are pushing for more specific windows for Indigenous peoples. It's not clear yet if we will manage to get more specific support to them, but we're hoping with the initiative that I mentioned from the GEF7, we have another one for the GEF8, that we can create some more support to them. And I think one of the most famous mechanisms that we have for finance is the small grant programs. We hope to continue reaching out to indigenous peoples, youth, civil society through this other mechanism. Something that I wanted to tell you and invite you, so contact Ushue whenever you have a question, is that the reason why we came up to make this intersectionality between groups is that we can gain more strength if we work together. And this is one of the reasons why we thought, okay, this is a time to do something at these intersections. And I will leave it here, but if you have any questions, please just send me an email or send an email to Ushue. If you're also interested in a more specific long presentation of all the work that we do, just feel free to drop us a message and we will be happy to provide more in detail. That is what we do and how can we support your actions on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for that presentation. And I think I saw someone in the chat asking for your email, so you do have that available to you now. I am really excited for this. I want to bring on Himavati Shekhar. She is from the Mercury Youth Task Force. She will be talking about youth programming, what youth will be doing at the forthcoming COP6. Himavati.
Hi everyone, thank you so much, Joshua, for that introduction. I'm so excited to be here. CWYP and the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus have come together to build this beautiful task force. We're super excited for the work we're doing, and we have so many exciting activities lined up in the lead up to the Minamata COP6 itself. And can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm gonna take you through all the amazing work that the task force is doing so that you all can know more about it and try to engage with us as much as possible. And we launched the task force way back in July 2025. We have over 70 people across youth constituencies, youth-led organizations, and many individuals who have joined us. And approximately 75% of the task force is from Global South, which is such an incredible achievement when we are trying to fight for representation all the time. So we're already doing amazing. And this task force is co-led by the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform and the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus itself. So you'll see a lot of smiling faces in our task force meeting. That's the picture right there. We're always happy to be doing the work that we're doing. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so in the lead up to the COP, Minamata Secretariat itself organizes regional preparatory meetings so that the regional issues are not ignored when it comes to the international forum. So there's been conversations at the LAC level in Europe, in Africa, in Asia Pacific, and we've had the incredible opportunity and some amazing young people join these regional meetings at all these 4 places. So you'll see all of them in these photos. We've been able to make interventions and go prepared and ensure that youth voices are not just being heard at the COP that is going to happen soon, but there are also regional conversations and regional priorities being represented and showcased at the regional preparatory meetings itself. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the most important thing is that we're going to have an output of all the work that we're doing, and that's going to be the first ever Global Youth Declaration on Mercury. And how are we arriving at this output and declaration itself? So we're planning many activities across regions and having various dialogues based on identity as well. So there are 10 plus dialogues happening, which we'd love for all of you to join in. And just yesterday, we finished our first ever regional youth dialogue with Latin America and Caribbean youth. With the consultation, it went incredible. And we have many other dialogues with Africa, Asia Pacific. We also have identity-based dialogues with Indigenous peoples as well. So we're happy to share all the information. You can also find this on our social media. Please do join us, because it is also our responsibility to take your voices all the way to COP and have negotiators listen to your issues. And we take this as our responsibility to represent you responsibly, and by contributing to this dialogue, we're going to make sure that your voices are heard at the international level. Can we go to the next, please? And we'll also have recordings available, so please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to share that with you. And again, I think we're gonna have like a lot of firsts this time, and this is also another first for us. It's the first ever youth forum and mercury pollution, and this is exactly where we'll be presenting the youth declaration that is representative of all the voices. So this is going to happen right before the COP starts on the 2nd of November on a Sunday, and from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central European time. And what we're going to do at the Youth Forum itself is that there are going to be 3 thematic roundtables that are going to exclusively focus on mercury pollution related to children and young people. And then we're also going to have the Global Youth Dialogue that is in collaboration with the Ministry of Japan, while we have the formal presentation of the Youth Declaration. So all the regional dialogues, the conversations at the preparatory meetings, we're also going to have a survey sent out for those who can't join the regional dialogues to still be able to contribute to the Youth Declaration. All of this will come together as the Youth Declaration, and there'll be a formal presentation when we are doing the dialogue with the Ministry of Japan itself. And we're also, it's not just going to be conversations, amongst experts and everybody else. We're also hoping that young people are able to network with each other, and we're also able to co-learn, sit down and collaborate so that we can draft youth interventions, and we can also build our own capacity right before COP to see how we can engage with policymakers, learn a little bit more about negotiations and stuff. We don't have to be experts in the space to join this, but what we're trying to do best is to be as inclusive. We learn, co-learn, learn from each other, and then go prepared as young people for the negotiations at COP6. Next slide, please. Okay, another exciting thing is our exhibition booth that will be back at the Minamata COP as well. We've successfully held 2 of them at ICCM5 and the BRS COPs this year. And they have been such a great success to be able to showcase everything young people are doing regarding the issues around chemical and waste. And this is, I think, a safe space for all young people to gather and share their work. So this is going to happen at Minamata COP as well. So what we're going to do, one important aspect of this is going to be the mercury pollution solutions map. So what we're going to try and showcase youth-led projects and stories from across the world that is addressing mercury pollution, child labor that is hazardous, cosmetics, and all the issues that we look at when it comes to mercury. But the map is supposed to give you hope, because people across the world are working on it, and you're not alone in the work that you're doing. And then we're also going to have a testimony video wall. So we're going to try and showcase pre-recorded videos from youth across the world sharing their lived experiences with mercury pollution, so that the decision makers who come to our booth are also able to see and understand what is truly happening on the ground, and they take back these lived experience and learnings from these lived experience back to the negotiation rooms itself. So the QR code on the slide, if you're interested in sharing your story, please scan the QR code. We're also happy to share it with you. And we'd love to hear your story and your lived experience, so that we can make your story heard to the decision makers. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think I'm done. Yes, now I'll hand it over back to Joshua, but this is all about Mercury Youth Task Force. We have so much happening. We're so excited to be doing what we're doing, and we do it with a great sense of responsibility, and we'd love for everybody to engage as much as possible with us. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Joshua.
Thank you so much, Hemavati. Thank you. I think that it's time to hear a little bit of youth testimonies with sort of experiences with mercury pollution. And I will be bringing on board Francis Asamoah. Francis is part of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration's Youth Task Force. Francis?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk a little bit about my experience with mercury pollution. So, as you said, I am part of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and also part of the UNCCD Youth Caucus. My name is Francis. Sorry, I'm from Ghana, and over the last years, we have seen a major surge in cases of mercury pollution, which is linked to small-scale illegal mining in Ghana. And to give a little bit of a statistic, we have over 1 million miners, active miners, who are mining illegally in Ghana. And the major issue with this kind of mining is that they handle mercury without any safety protocols. So from the past year, that's 2024, to now, one of the biggest hospitals in the country has recorded over 20 cases of people having birth-related issues, which are all directed towards mercury pollution. We have seen in this year, in the early part of this year, report from the nation's Food and Drugs Authority warning that they have seen traces of mercury in many food products, many very common food products that are being sold on the market. So in Ghana now, we are having children born with a lot of deformities that are all related to young girls and women being involved in illegal mining activities. Over the years, we have been advocating for the stop or the end of this mining, and it has taken a very serious national toll because in 2021, the European Union even threatened the ban of cocoa from Ghana because of some of gold traces, mercury traces in the cocoa beans. So you realize that this is a very critical issue. We are having children dying. We're having mothers losing their lives at childbirth, all related to birth complications that are traced back to their work in illegal mining sites. We are having food products that are having very high levels that are very, very concerning. The mercury pollution in Ghana now is reaching a level where the National Medical Association describes it as uncontrollable. We are experiencing a very high level of mercury in most of the things that we take in as a people. And so for me, because I grew up in a rural area where illegal mining started smaller and now it has become a large scale activity that a lot of people are involved in, even though it's seen to some people as a source of livelihood. The argument is always that if you are supposed to choose between having good life and selecting a very short-lived life, which one are you going to take? And we are having major issues because this is like it's more national. We've been working with the national authority. We've been working with more partners to try and have a ban on illegal mining activities so that we reduce the amount of mercury that we are seeing now. Because now, if this is not checked and if we continue at the rate at which we are doing, we are not only losing biodiversity, but we are losing our lives, in addition to trying to find a short and an easy way of making quick money. So that is me from my side. And then thank you very much, Shannon and Joshua, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francis. I think that, just learning about your experiences with Mercury, and especially someone who's so close to home. You're in Ghana, I'm Nigerian. Just highlights the fact that there is more and more need to have youth voices in these spaces. I'm going to quickly call on Naveen Gautam. I hope I pronounced your name properly. Naveen is a part of the CDWD Youth Constituency and also a part of something called the Inclusivity Project. Hi, Naveen.
Hey Joshua, thank you. I just lost my speech somewhere, but it's okay. Doesn't matter. I will just use my experience. I think what Francis has also very specifically said. Am I audible, Joshua? Is it fine?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly and see
Yeah,
you
thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think one more aspect which we are kind of massively missing upon is the identity-based marginalization, which specific communities, indigenous communities, and also communities discriminated on work and descent. So which are kind of extensively facing, but they are erased, they are invisible. They don't appear in the numbers, they don't appear in the conventions. And there are only a few documents which talk about these forms of discrimination, where I'm sure people might have heard about the caste-based discrimination happening in India, South Asia. But there is a broader version attached to it where a specific community is being discriminated because they are considered as impure, because they are considered as somebody who has to be segregated because otherwise they will pollute the whole society. And that's a reality. People say that it's not kind of existing now. It's a reality because now also more than 270 million people are facing this form of discrimination. And slowly since past 4 or 5 years itself, we have started getting traction because we collect evidences from around 22 to 23 countries altogether. How specifically youth and children are the ones who are kind of facing these forms of discrimination, just because there is a notion of purity and pollution attached to the whole aspect of their survival, and of course being segregated. And and there is a whole overlooked human dimension when we talk about very specifically chemical and hazardous substances, specifically in terms of the mercury as well. We are talking about Minamata conferences very extensively, but there is one community which is extensively missing out because we're not willing to talk about them because of their identity. And we do talk about sanitation workers, we do talk about waste speakers, we do talk about tanners, recyclers, and small scale miners, but our whole identity is attached to these people who are known as CDWD, community discriminated on work and decent, and they're the one who are exposed to these toxic chemicals and mercury because they live in that area. They don't have any other place because neither they exist on paper, neither there is a disaggregated data for them, neither they have a official government documents for them. So the only place they have is a place where they dump all these toxic chemicals and toxic aspects. And that's not the only thing. That's also how reflect how they are being pushed in terms of social and occupational hierarchies when we talk about these communities, and they're exposed to the environmental health and healthy risk or at all. And when we actually talk about mercury, we must also talk about mercury workers. The same global supply chain, when we say that poisons rivers also sacrifices a whole entire community living next to the river altogether. Why? Not only because of their because of the place they live, but also the cheap labor and cheap consumption. When we talk about those who are forced to handle the world's waste, mercury, and toxic residues, and that's not by their choice. They are being pushed back because of the whole long existing centuries of social hierarchies. So I think if you name those specific communities, mostly Dalits in Asia, Roma community in Europe, Haratin tanners in Mauritania, migrant waste speakers in Latin America, they're like all over the world who are trying to fight for their own life. And also most of the mining, tanneries, and open dump sites are the places where they are forced to work because they don't have any other opportunities. Because sometimes member states also have failed to kind of provide them opportunities. And yet, when we talk about Minamata or Basel conventions, their names actually doesn't appear. Second is, how do you link it with the social inclusion and environmental policies? Most national mercury and chemical management plans do not yet consider social vulnerability or discrimination. Even if you look at the whole document which comes up, we are not talking about the specific aspect of social vulnerability which has been existing and what are the communities which are facing this thing. And so we really need to kind of integrate this whole aspect of social inclusion into chemicals and waste policies, not only when we talk about the Minamata Convention, but also when we talk about the national and the regional policies very extensively. I was just having a conversation with Shannon that day while we were there at the UN Third Committee. We were kind of discussing how our specific community is being pushed back, and even if they don't want to stay near that place, they are being forced because they have an identity that they are impure. They have an identity that they are the ones who deserve to live in that dirty place, do that menial jobs. And of course, that's why waste management and trade control measures under the Bali Declaration, and there are other declaration when we keep talking about, but these communities are the ones which have been
Hi.
facing the brunt. So just
Hi,
one
Naveen.
minute, just 1 minute. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I know that we have like a very sort of, the technical team is having a bit of the meeting. I kind of see like a bit of a countdown. So if you want to quickly wrap up, that would be good.
Just 10 seconds, 10 seconds. I'm wrapping up. 10 seconds. Yeah, sure. So, and of course, two more important recommendations are: we need to recognize CDWD, communities discriminated on work and decent, as a vulnerable group. The fight for the getting the rights and the identifying the struggles for the indigenous group has been massive, and we also want to kind of take a guidance from them and kind of being recognized. Slowly the process has started. The UN Third Committee and ECOSOC forums have started acknowledging, but Mercury and other Minamata Convention, other space we want to be specifically recognized. And also we need to build cross ministry coordination between environmental, labor, and social sectors, which is more important to be brought up. So I have other recommendations, but I'll rest my case here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naveen. And thank you so much, everyone who's spoken today, and those of you who have been here as our audience and listeners. We hope that you've gotten a grasp of the Minamata Convention. There is a part 2 of this happening soon, on the 29th of October. You can scan this so you get a link to register for the webinar, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you there again. Thank you so much to our speakers. We're looking forward to seeing you on the 29th of October. Thank you. And thank you, Shannon, for having me.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.